Today we are joined by our partner, H5, for a webinar entitled From Pain to Gain, Automating Privilege Workflows with H5 Matter Analytics. Thanks for joining us, everyone, today. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know we love questions. We're happy to take your questions. You can submit your questions using the Q&A widget located at the bottom of your screen. All questions are anonymous. Also, if you'd like a copy of the slide deck from today's presentation, you can download that from the resource widget also at the bottom of your screen. Without further delay, I'm pleased and super excited to introduce our presenters, and I'm going to hand off to Jason Richard for introductions. Jason, take it away.
All right, thank you, Mike. And a big thank you to ACEDS for providing us this opportunity to present to you today. I'm Jason Richard, VP of Products for H5. I know life is throwing a lot at everyone right now, so we really appreciate each of you taking the time to spend with us in today's presentation. For those of you who aren't familiar with H5, we specialize in providing search and data analytics solutions to companies and law firms that help them find key facts and insights to address eDiscovery needs, investigations, and other data management challenges. I'm joined today by Jeff Grobart, Associate Director at H5, who will be contributing his extensive experience and insights regarding privilege review to our discussion. Jeff, can you provide the group a little background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason. So this is Jeff Grobart. I've been working as a consultant within the litigation field for the past 20 years or so. And that's covered a whole host of different areas, from everything from providing guidance on trial presentation to data collection, overseeing document reviews. And, throughout, one of the hallmarks of my experience has been leveraging existing and emerging technologies to try and make all of those different areas a little bit easier for my clients. So looking forward to talking about ways that we can help simplify privilege review for everybody.
All right, great. Thank you, Jeff. So we'll be starting the discussion with an overview of some of the major challenges case teams and their support organizations face in managing privilege review workflows. We'll take a look at H5 Matter Analytics, our proprietary technology that is introducing new ways to help automate and accelerate privilege review workflows while mitigating common risks. And then also hear from Jeff throughout and some of his experiences and some of the experiences our experts leaned on to help inform some of the capabilities in the application. And finally, we'll finish with some questions and answers. So turning our attention to potential privilege challenges, Jeff, what do you think is the greatest challenge facing legal teams when it comes to potential privilege?
Well, as we can see on the screen, it's got to be the trade-offs that everybody faces. It's the classic three-legged stool issue that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, that you can do something. Your three choices of you can have it fast, you can have it accurate, you can have it cheap. And if you pick two out of those three all the time, it's when you're trying to get all three at once that things get complicated. And so you can complete a review quickly and cost efficiently, but it may not be the most accurate. Likewise, you could do something accurately and cheaply, but it likely won't be done very fast. And finally, you can do something fast and accurate, but it's probably going to cost you quite a bit. And so balancing all of those trade-offs is really the cornerstone of trying to make good decisions about how to manage reviews in general and privilege reviews in particular.
Gotcha. Obviously, something's got to give. So what's usually sacrificed given these trade-offs?
When it comes to privilege, there's one overriding need that you just can't get around, and that's making sure that you find all of the privileged documents. Protecting that sensitive data from opposing counsel and whomever else is paramount. And so once you've got that locked in, then there's everything else kind of works from there. And so in order to make sure that you're achieving that sufficient privilege coverage, invariably folks are going to wind up having an overbroad privilege review just to make sure that they feel very confident and comfortable with the fact that their their population is going to include all of those privileged documents.
Gotcha. And after wrestling with some of these trade-offs, what's the next most common struggle?
It has to be that privilege review with reviews in general, again, are inconsistent. Individuals, you get any group of individuals, especially attorneys, looking at documents, virtually everybody's going to have a different opinion on what is or isn't responsive, what is or isn't going to be privileged. Beyond that, being able to organize a review in a way that allows you to be able to try and make more consistent decisions doesn't always work out. And so similar or identical documents that are reviewed days, hours, even minutes apart, different people may be making different decisions, and even the same person may make different decisions about the same document or a similar document. And beyond that, withholding the same content everywhere that it exists is difficult to do as well. Thinking about redaction, the redaction process in most reviews, you may have documents that are under-redacted that are revealing potentially privileged information. You'll have some that are perfectly redacted, and then you'll wind up with others that are over-redacted and are withholding non-privileged information. And other than that second scenario where everything's done perfectly, you really don't want to be in a position where you've under or over-redacted documents. And so being able to smooth out those inconsistencies is really important.
Got it. And what are teams actually doing to become more consistent?
One of the things that I've seen most frequently is that law firms will have a designated privilege expert involved in a review, and they'll look at most, if not all, of the documents that are going to appear in a privilege log to make sure that coding decisions that are applied to those privileged documents are consistently applied. They may be checking the redactions to make sure that they're consistently applied as well. But that only really takes care of the portion that have accurately been identified as privileged. But what it doesn't do is provide a good mechanism for capturing documents that should have been caught for privilege that weren't. And beyond that, I mentioned it earlier, but leveraging technological options for doing things like looking at potentially privileged families in thread groups or duplicate groups so that you can try and manage the inconsistencies that way. But frequently that requires a lot of manual intervention and or it's making assumptions about the quality of the first level review as well in terms of capturing and identifying those potentially privileged documents.
Yeah. Okay. And then, are there other concerns that teams are facing regarding the actual review itself?
Sure. Manual privilege review is before all other things, it's manual. And so, it's difficult to manage teams and individuals in general. So that starts with hiring or identifying the best available team, whether that's an in-house review team or you're hiring a set of contractors, and dealing with things like what we're all dealing with now, and having folks unable to come into a secure location to handle the review, for instance. And so that opens up opportunities for data exposure risks, whether it be through a phishing scheme or other, opportunistic things that bad actors are doing out there. Beyond that, again, development of review efficiencies that can help streamline or at least make the review as efficient as possible. In many cases, it's a case-by-case situation, depending on who you're working with and what the nature of the data is. And so building those types of efficiencies from the ground up with every review is costly and time-consuming as well. And more than anything, and we've already touched on it a little bit, but identifying reviewer errors early and often so that appropriate privilege calls are being made and folks that are making inaccurate calls can be corrected or, in some instances, removed from the review project as well.
And then in terms of how folks are trying to identify and prioritize content, I know a lot of folks are using keywords and things of that nature, obviously nameless as well, but I'm curious, some of the challenges that arise through using those types of techniques.
Yeah, and the downside of using, the great thing about keywords is that it's comfortable, it's, you know what you're getting out of it, and it will certainly find every instance of the word privilege in a document set, for instance. The problem is that then you wind up having to review every single one of those hits. And it's because using generic proof terms in addition to, things that are going to be a little bit more surgical, like attorney names or law firm names, those generic terms are generic for a reason, and it's because they're not going to be the most precise thing out there. And especially in the modern world where every email that gets sent out has a disclaimer at the bottom saying that, if you've received this email in error, delete it. It may be subject to attorney-client privilege, and it's confidential, and all of this. Those words appear in every email virtually, and then you're suddenly reviewing every single email, and that's not something that you would necessarily want to do. And so being able to modify a term list or a search to be able to eliminate boilerplate can be done, but it takes time, it takes a little bit of expertise, and it has to take into account the fact that every single organization that might be corresponding with the company that you might be representing can and likely will have different versions of that boilerplate language, just as one example. And so having to account for all of those different language variations can be a difficult proposition at best. And, otherwise, the alternative, just to drive it home again, is that every single hit needs to be reviewed, and more often than not, that means looking at not just the email or the individual document that's being hit on by a privilege term, but then the family as well. And so review sets privilege review sets in particular, can swell very quickly because of that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And we've gone through quite a few challenges here, but what's the bottom line?
Well, when you break it all down, you've got your the trade-offs, the inconsistencies, the manual process, and having to review every hit. If you take a letter from each of those, that all adds up to time. And as we all know, time means money, and it just means that privilege reviews, as I'm sure everybody on the line is well aware, they're expensive, and probably the most expensive part of the review process in most instances.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Jeff. And that's a good lead into what we're going to show you today, which is to present you with H5 Matter Analytics and some of the new capabilities we're introducing to really help organizations solve some of these challenges. So with H5 Matter Analytics, it's important to give a little bit of background. So we've been developing technology for accelerating review, potential privilege identification, and identifying key documents and matters for nearly 2 decades. It's been technology that we've kept to ourselves, mostly as an advantage in delivering H5 services. H5 Matter Analytics is something a little bit different, though. It's a relativity integrated application that's inspired by processes and elements from our established technology stack, but it's been built from the ground up to help enable other organizations achieve similar outcomes for certain use cases, such as potential privilege identification, and really put it into a nice, intuitive solution that you control. That's a really important piece to this. Being seamlessly integrated inside of relativity, it also ensures that the data stays where it is and the application and the solutions are meeting the case teams where they already are. The application has many capabilities. We've got things like personally identifiable information identification, so PII identification, advanced structured analytics, so a lot of great capabilities related to threading, visualizing threads, as well as near-dupe identification and things like that, and a lot more. And in an era where data security is paramount, but the tension of cost containment is eminently important for organizations, enabling those organizations to do more with less, for accelerating privilege review workflows and reducing privilege review data volumes, that's really where we're going to be focused today in terms of what the application can do for you. This also includes capabilities that the application has to advance your footing with privilege logs and help automate a lot of painfully manual tasks like name normalization, generating automated privilege reasons to determine the nature of why a document is privileged. And all of this is bundled inside of a very cost-effective package that gives organizations an opportunity to save significantly, not just on their eDiscovery analytics spend, but also really reducing that privilege review spend, which is such a significant portion of any matter's budget, as we've discussed. In terms of how we do it, let's take a look at some of the fundamental building blocks in H5 Matter Analytics that allow us to succeed where other approaches may struggle. So first, we improve on the ability to kind of understand who's who and what organizations are what. We do that through providing some simple and quick ways to automate the identification and profiling of individuals and organizations in the data population, especially as it relates to how they're going to impact privilege assessments. Second, we utilize sophisticated structured analytics to understand every single email header in the data population. And so this goes beyond just simple metadata analysis and top header information. But it's really going through all of the subsumed elements of every single email message to make sure that we've got a real comprehensive understanding of who's out there and who's communicating, even if they don't appear anywhere in metadata. Third, we can effectively distinguish between email headers and messages and the corresponding email body. This allows us to make very nuanced decisions, such as whether an attorney is present in an email header, in which case they may be communicating, or if they're mentioned in the message body, in which case they may be discussed. And this gets into some of the prioritization that we'll show you once we get into the application. And then fourth, and perhaps the most important, we're leveraging our experience in modeling privilege language that we've developed over hundreds of matters, numerous industries, as well as in doing so, targeting over 500 legal concepts that are going to be able to go out and identify content out of the box. That also includes a list of over 1,800 law firms that we can find from a mention standpoint in data that consists of both past and present law firms. All the while, we're able to avoid detected disclaimers and boilerplate language and email footer information, like we discussed, out of the box without any training necessary. So there's a lot of capabilities that are in the application that are benefiting organizations from our experience. And so that allows folks to really get a very strong footing right out of the gate. All right, so now we've talked a little bit about some of the building blocks and the foundation of what we're doing with Matter Analytics. Now we're going to do a demonstration of the application. You can see how all of this works in practice. All right. Okay, hopefully this is visible for everybody. So what we're going to start with here is an insight into really the destination. So this is some of the fielded output that we're generating. It's just a sampling. There's a lot of different content that we create as a part of the analysis that's happening. But the results are being pushed directly right inside of Relativity because the application lives inside of Relativity. It's a tab inside of Relativity. The results are automatically added to the documents based on the rules and the sets and the analytics you decide to run. Here we can see a couple examples that are pertinent to our discussion today. We have our name normalization output. So we're understanding who the individuals are using reliable name output. These names can be flipped in terms of name order and capitalization. So a lot of great tools in here for helping with some of those tough priv-log pieces that we mentioned before. But we're also able to use some of the categorization that I mentioned in terms of understanding who people are. Are they in-house counsel? Are they a third party? Are they part of the client organization? And this can give us a really good indication of who's communicating where. Additionally, we have the ability to not just understand who's sending emails and who's receiving emails, but understanding the full cast of characters up and down the message chain, which may introduce new insights. So here we can see that there's many more individuals present in this conversation. And up here at the top, we can even see that there's an attorney present somewhere in this message, even if at the top level we've got a third party and one of the client organization individuals communicating. As we get a little bit further to the right, here's the output that's going to be generated as a part of our potential privilege identification process. We're going to be tagging documents based on a tiering system on the types of information that triggered our priv assessment. So we can see clearly here, we've got attorney-client communication as a tier 1, which is the highest priority. We have tier 3 general legal topics. This is that linguistic modeling that I mentioned before to help find the legal concepts in the document population. We also have a family or propagated field, which is helping us understand which families are maybe tier 1, so they're the most important families. Tier 2, where we have more mentions to rely on. And this is going to be a really powerful field to use for batching documents and helping organize the review workflow. We also have our auto-generated privilege reasons. These are document-level reasons that are based on rules that you control. We have a lot of great defaults right out of the box. And then we have the ability to identify where we may have third parties communicating at the top of the message, or even in situations where we have broad distributions. So this is important because these may require a different lens. There may be things here that would have a cooling effect on the privilege assessment. And so these are great fields to leverage as a part of your batching strategy, as a part of your review strategy. Okay. So I've shown you a little bit about the destination here in terms of some of the results that you're going to have to work with as a part of the output of the process. Now I'm going to show you how we got those. So in clicking on the Matter Analytics tab, this is the hub that controls all of the analytics that's run inside of Relativity, inside of the Relativity workspace. The different types of analytics that we can perform are all organized based on 3 major categories of analytics. Relationship identification is a combination of our structured analytics. So that includes things like our name normalization or threading, near duplicate identification. Privilege analytics is also another flavor of relationship identification today. Metadata augmentation is a way of adding some features to documents that can be helpful. So we can auto code and generate values for emails that have no metadata. So we can automatically identify the sender, the recipient, the sent dates, and the subjects. Even on an OCR data population you may have received inbound from another producing party. Classifiers, this is where we can get into our PII identification. But for today, we're going to be spending most of our time up here in relationship identification related to our priv identification. So the first step in our path here to identify potentially privileged documents is to run name normalization and begin to start to do some of that automated classification of people and organizations. So to do that, I can just click on Create New Set. Go ahead and say I'm going to do a priv name normalization run. Because we're inside of Relativity, you can simply pick from a saved search inside of the workspace. Again, everything stays right inside of the workspace. And then from an algorithm standpoint, you come in and pick the different type of analytics that you wish to run, in which case, or for now, I'm going to click Name Normalization. So name normalization is where we go through and we understand all of the different message headers in the population. We pull people out of those headers and create normalized and unique instances for each of those individuals and associate all the different email variants and maiden names and nicknames and everything with one individual. We also pull out all of the organizations. So as we encounter domains, we create a knowledge base of all of the different organizations we've detected at the top of headers, at the bottom of headers, anywhere in the email population that we find them. I'll show you what that looks like in our Entity Profiles tab. The first set of decisions we have here are what fields we want to use. So we can pick which normalized field outputs we want. So we have from, to, CC, BCC, your standard email distribution fields. We have some combination fields here that organize all of the recipients together. Email participants all is all of the participants up and down the message. So very valuable, especially as you get into priv-log and trying to make sure you have an accounting of all folks that may be present in the message, even in lesser headers. But the other piece that we could do here is we can begin to categorize who folks are in the data population based on their domains. So here, I'm going to go ahead and say h5.com. Maybe we've got another organization that also represents the client organization. I'm going to mark all of these folks as client. So what's going to happen is as these individuals are found in the data population, they have these domains, they're automatically going to be assigned a function which tells us who they are in the population. I can also come in here and begin to categorize law firms. So if we have multiple outside counsel firms, for instance, we can identify those folks as outside counsel. I may want to add who opposing counsel is. And maybe we even have a government agency that we want to identify through this process. So as we auto-identify these different domains and help start to categorize who people are, which organizations are what, there's going to be a number of organizations in the data population that we don't know who they are. It could be Amazon.com. It could be from people's shipment orders. It could be other organizations we just aren't aware of at this stage. And so what we can do here is use a catch-all to assign all of the other domains that are encountered, besides the one we know, assign them all as third party. And this is going to help us mitigate any potential risk of calling something privileged where there may be somebody else in the data population that could cause a challenge. So this is an important way of making sure we're honing in on really the documents that are truly potentially privileged. So when I click Save and Run, what's going to happen is it's going to go through and conduct that process, and then it's going to create our entity profiles. So I'm going to go over and hop over here. Our entity profiles are going to be a knowledge base of all of the individuals that have been identified in the data population using our name normalization algorithm and our header extraction algorithm. And it's also going to create a list of all of the organizations in the data population. So again, this is based on domains and parsing domains, whether it be personal email, work email, all those domains are going to have a place in this, this knowledge base. Now, if I go back to people, we've auto-assigned our functions based on domain, but before I run privilege analytics, I'm going to need to do some fine-tuning. And that can be done at an individual level, at a combination of individuals, or even at the organization level. But here, I'm going to come in, I'm going to pick on our top communicator here, Kim Ward. I can see some information here that's been added to Kim's profile, so we've got some detail on who Kim is. I can also see all of the different organizations that have been extracted from her email domains that are associated with Kim, and I can actually see those organizations. I can click on these and go to the organization profile. But if I come down here, you can see what our name normalization algorithm is doing. It's identifying many different variations of Kim automatically through the name normalization process, and then out of that, we get one record for Kim Ward. And this number up here is actually all the communication that Kim exists in a header, whether it's at the top or a subsumed header. So it's a really nice comprehensive list of documents that contain Kim. Additionally, what we're doing is we're finding mentions of Kim based on what we're learning through the name normalization process. So this is where Kim exists in message bodies, but not in email headers. You can see that we have ways of accounting for things like nicknames and other name variations based on what we're doing in our analysis of the email headers. So this is a very important piece of being able to identify attorneys that may be mentioned in the body of documents. Now, I'm going to go ahead and change Kim's function to be in-house counsel, because again, we're fine-tuning now. We did our broad stroke domain level categorization, but now we're making individual level decisions. And so when I run privilege analytics, this is going to play into that, and we're going to be able to use this distinction in the results. I'm also going to back out here. I'm going to take a look at organizations, because now I want to know what organizations are in the population, and maybe I want to do some fine-tuning based on that. And so there's some things that we're doing in here that are adding a lot of logic, and again, bringing in some of that experience that we have to help in your research of who's in the data population. One of those things is not just extracting the organizations, but auto-identifying what type of organization it is. So we have for instance, a library in the application of known personal email domains across the globe. So you're going to find, there's hundreds of them in here, but you're going to find personal email very quickly, even with different types of personal email domains you may not even recognize. There's some in here that are from other countries and Russia and so on. So it's a nice way to get in and start to understand the personal email in the data population. But most pertinent to today's conversation is law firm. So law firm is where we take over 1,800 past and present law firms, and that's going to be something that continues to build over time as we release new versions or introduce new law firms. But this creates a really nice way of understanding all of the law firms that were detected in the data population and where they exist in top or sub-level headers. Now, you're seeing a lot of law firms here, and these were actually, I'm going to pause for just a moment. But in the law firms, a good story that we have from some of the work that we did at Legal Tech and presenting to different organizations what we're up to, there were law firms that we were presenting to that hadn't even known that they were in the Enron data population. And the reason for that is that they don't exist in metadata. Where they exist is actually in subheaders in messages, so obscured from any sort of obvious view inside of the application. So it's a great way to do some initial research and find ways to, or find maybe co-counsel or other organizations or prior outside counsel that may be a surprise during the presentation or during the review, and make sure you categorize those individuals appropriately. Okay, now I'm getting back into relativity, so I'm going to share again. And as we get into the workspace here, in addition to understanding who the organizations are, you get to go in and understand the individuals related to those organizations. So let me hop into, let's see here. Should still be filtered in, perfect. So I'm going to pick on Baker Bots here. Again, these are all from the Enron data population. When you click on an organization, you're going to be able to understand who in the population was found related to that particular domain using that domain extraction, and you can go explore those emails. Another nice thing about our organization profiles is when you're helping outside counsel understand who organizations are, these profiles can be a great way of profiling details about the organization. This is just a quick little snippet from Enron, or for Enron out of Wikipedia. And you can also create relationships between organizations. So you can maybe identify subsidiaries and others based on other organizations present. So lots of different ways of leveraging the organization profiles to make this very helpful. But now that we've gone through and perhaps changed and reversed some of the function designations that were applied via the domain level assessments, we've done some individual changes, we've done some organization changes. Now it's time to run privilege analytics, because now we've got everybody profiled and all the organizations profiled. Okay, so I'm going to hop back to Meta Analytics, and I'm going to create a new job, and that's going to be a privilege analytics job. Pick another saved search, and then I'm going to pick a privilege analytics algorithm type. So you're going to see email threading and name normalization up top, and that's because they run with privilege analytics. This helps enable a number of features that I'm going to show you inside of our thread viewer that make the privilege review results or the privilege analytics results that much easier to consume. So we're going to do things like identify very clearly in a map view where third parties and attorneys are entering and exiting branches. A lot of powerful tools there. But that requires us to run these together. But if I come down to privilege analytics, this is where all of the work happens to identify your tiered privilege results. So if we look at the job here, we're setting up things like the priv waiver indicators. So here we can identify anywhere where third-party communicators exist. You can pick from your list of different functions that you may have used, and you can add custom functions. You can get very detailed in this, but we have a number of defaults out of the box to help get you started, which is what you're seeing appear belonging to these organizations or these functions appear in the top of an email header. You're going to get a tag that says third-party communicator present. Here, you have an ability to modify this, but anywhere a distribution has more than 10 individuals present, it's going to tag it as broad distribution. So again, we're trying to automate a lot of things, make things a lot simpler, but you still have control over these details to make sure you can tailor this to meet the needs of your matter. Now that we get down into the tiering, this is where you get to decide which documents are actually potentially privileged based on our tiering. The first piece here is which functions, similar to what you saw above, are going to constitute a Tier 1 attorney-client communication when they're found in an email header. And this is going to look up and down the message. So we're not just looking at the top of the message, we're looking at the subheaders as well. These rules down here relate to the priv reasons. These are the auto reasons that are being assigned to the documents. And there's a lot here. It looks maybe more complicated than it is, because what's happening here is you're simply saying, I want this privilege reason to be based on this particular scenario, using our criteria here. And most of it is about direction of communication. So for instance, we have attorneys, and it's going to be modified to reflect different functions. You can add custom ones, you can remove ones that we have, but these are the defaults out of the box. But what it's saying is anywhere attorneys are messaging the client, it's going to be providing legal advice. Anywhere down here below, the reverse is true. A client is messaging attorneys, it's requesting legal advice. And then, if you want to take attachments into consideration, it's providing information to counsel for the purpose of seeking legal advice. So some very easy rule-building techniques here to help with the priv reasons for your Tier 1 communication identification. Now, if I come a little bit further below, this is Tier 2. This is all about mentions. So similarly, it's very simple. You pick whichever functions you want to have be designated as a Tier 2 attorney mention based on what we found in the message body or in the document, non-email document. And you can even add matter-specific firm mentions. So in this case, I know we have a fake law firm named Davis & Richards. So I could add this, similar to how you might manage an STR or search term report, and you can build this out with many different entries. So you could do whatever law firms are involved from an outside counsel perspective, maybe even names that you want to supplement because they're things that may be very challenging to find through normalization, if they're nicknames, things like that. So a lot of different ways to use this, but it helps you build on what it is the application is going to find and tag as a Tier 2. And again, it's going to find it as a mention in an email body, not a header, or in a document. Now, the priv reasons here are a little bit different. These priv reasons are all about where we found the mention. So here we have prepared by counsel in anticipation of litigation. This is about where we found somebody in a document author field, meaning we found an attorney that authored a document using metadata, or in the first 100 words of a document. So that might be a memo. So that might be about, we can have some confidence that's been prepared by counsel. So lots of flexibility here. You can add more, you can remove these. And then down below, this is a super powerful part of the application, but there's not a lot of decisions to make. It's all about running our existing logic that we have out of the box. So the first is general firm mentions. You can turn this on or off, but that'll find mentions of over 1,800 law firms, like I said, past and present, in message bodies and documents. And then general legal terms. This is those legal concepts that we're identifying to help highlight why a document is potentially privileged. So lots of good capabilities in here. Once you build this, it's going to be hopefully something that folks get really comfortable with. We also bring templates in and other things to help kind of reuse these rules over and over again to make it even simpler for subsequent matters. But lots of power in these capabilities. Now, I've set my rules here, and one thing I want to note is you have an ability to either import the results or not. And this actually has an impact on licensing. So if you import the results, it's actually going to import the results and count them. But if you decide not to, you can actually just run it and get a preview of the potentially privileged results. So it's a really powerful piece of the application to be able to understand the value it's going to add before you actually import anything. And so when I talk about those reports, I'm going to click back and click on a completed privilege analytics report so you can understand what we're able to share with you. So in our reports, the first thing that's going to greet you is an overview of what was in the saved search you analyzed. So it's not about what the analytics created, it's just about what you looked at. And so you're going to see the custodians are in that set, the date range, et cetera. But as you get into the individual algorithm cards here, this is where all the detail comes into the results. And privilege analytics is our newest entry in terms of the reports that we're generating here, but there's a lot of great information. And again, this is information that's available to you even before you've paid anything from a licensing standpoint, because it's all able to be shared with you in a preview state. where it shows you exact numbers and exact percentages. Now, if I come down, actually, let me start up here. So up here, we have our summary card that shows you the total percentage of potential privileged content in the data population and how much has been not identified. Down here, we can see when you expand that to families what that looks like. And so here we can see our different tiers that have been identified. And then not identified is a really important category as well, because these documents are ones where we have not found any indication of potential privileged content. So you may be able to take different production strategies or fast-track strategies with the not identified while you then get the other documents into the privileged queue. And then here's a breakdown, again, at a document level. And then when we get into these other details, this is where it gets fun, because it starts to share with you information about what we found in the documents. So here we have our priv waiver indicators. And so this is showing the top 10 individuals that triggered a priv waiver tag on a document. You may be able to find from here that somebody's being mistagged. Maybe you want to do some incremental work to try to get these honed down. Or you can even go and explore who these individuals are and begin to make some decisions there. Over here, you're going to be able to see the breakdown of third-party communicators as well as broad distributions. So a lot of good insights here on which segment may have, again, that cooling effect on your privileged decisions. And Jeff, I know you've had some interesting experiences with troublesome third parties. So I wanted to see if you could share some of your experience here.
Sure. I actually just very recently I was working on a case where client requested that we simply use privileged search terms. We ran the terms on the responsive set that was being reviewed after application of TAR, and much to ours and our clients' chagrin, the initial pass identified 90% of those responsive documents as being potentially privileged. We immediately thought about, there's got to be a way to be able to reduce that number because, quite frankly, it was astronomical. And so using tools just like what we're seeing here, we were able to identify a governmental agency that there were regular reports that our client was providing to them, all of which were public domain because of the nature of the reports. And so every single one of those emails and their attachments that were getting hit by priv terms because attorneys from our client organization were sending these messages to the regulator, every single one of them wound up being not privileged by default because we were able to identify them in this way. And it resulted in an exceptionally dramatic reduction where the potential privilege set went from that 90% that we started at down to 30%, which I think everybody involved was exceptionally happy that kind of a result was able to be achieved with really very little effort.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. And once you get through the priv waiver and again can help to start to understand which population may need a slightly different lens, we can get into the actual tiered results. So here we can see the top 10 attorney-client communicators, the folks that are triggering that Tier 1 priv identification tag. We can see the priv reasons that are being assigned. If I come down here, I can see the top 10 attorneys mentioned, which may be different than who's communicating. I can see the priv reasons that have been assigned. And I can even see some of those matter-specific firm mentions, like Davis Richards in our demo data here that have been identified. And this could be a much longer list if you decided to come in and seed it with a lot of things that you want to be tagged as Tier 2 so that you can prioritize those accordingly. Then down below, we've got our Tier 3 results that help us understand what was hit from our firm mentions, as well as what was hit by our legal concepts. So a lot of good detail here in the report. One thing to note about these reports, besides it being sort of a preview as well as a finished report, depending on your import decisions, they're very easy to share. So you can come in here and click share. You can email it to somebody. You can copy a link and paste it into a Skype message. And as long as they have permissions to view this tab in Relativity, they're going to be able to come in and interact with this report. Everything you see in Matter Analytics is very granular from a permissions management standpoint, and it works off of relativity proof. As well as, so it's just like the way you manage permissions today in Relativity. It's very simple to manage. You can also download as a PDF and share it that way. Okay. So now we've taken a look at the reports, and we've gotten our privilege results into the data population. We've got documents now to review. I want to take a look at some example documents to show you how our viewers are helping teams consume the results. Okay. So our first document here is a nice one. It's an example of where we've identified the presence of attorney-client communicators as well as some legal concepts. And we'll be able to take a look at some of our term highlighting and other things. Let our first relativity document load complete here. Actually, while this is loading up here, here we go. Just going to show that these results that we're providing are all fielded information that you can incorporate into your review layout and have that live alongside some of the things you're doing. We'll take a look at that in just a second. So as we look at the documents, we've got a relativity viewer up here, of course. Down here, we have our H5 viewers. This is our map view, and this is our conversation view. So these are all very flexible in terms of how much you want to use them. You can just use our map view. You can pop this out on a second monitor. But what this is helping you do is understand out of all of the different message headers, this is just one document, but it has 7 different headers where folks are coming in that may have an impact on your credit assessment. So for instance, if I come up here and look at communication markers, I have red anywhere we've got in-house, outside counsel, or legal agents communicating. And then the blue is anywhere we have a third party that might be communicating. So that's a very helpful tool in making sure you're understanding where folks are in the email communication and branches. And if I pull this up, down here, we get to see the entire email thread, or sorry, email message in this case. All of the headers have been parsed out and they're interactive. So whereas these would just look like extracted text in any other system, you can actually interact with these and understand who people are and click on the profiles and look at details. We're highlighting anywhere our legal concepts hit the document. Legal action is a little less interesting in terms of the concepts, but if I come down here, you can see where we're really hitting large swaths of content to help you understand what we hit and why. And because we're looking at things in this way, it's very nuanced. We're helping reduce false positives. Again, we're ignoring that disclaimer language out of the box to do this. And then we're also combining that with what we're doing on the attorney side to help find attorney communicators in the data population. So a really good way to see both the Tier 1 and the Tier 3 at work here. We also have a potential third-party waiver because of some of the communication that happens a little bit further down, where we've got third parties coming into the picture. And I'm just going to advance to the next example. The next example is going to show us how attorney mentions work. And this is important because here we have non-attorneys communicating about an attorney. So here they're saying, hey, I want to let you know that Salma Writers advises that we should be careful with any communications with George. I want to know who Salma is. I can click on her profile and take a look at it. But this is just showing you how we can kind of navigate around those headers and into the message bodies to identify information in a very nuanced way and prioritize accordingly. And on our next example, we've got a couple things happening here. So we've got a map where we have blue and red. This is because we have a third party on the same communications as some of our attorneys. So this is helping you understand kind of the communication flow that's happening here. And you can see it on a branch basis, individual message basis. We're seeing highlighting of text where we have folks communicating about legal concepts. We can see that we've got a third party here. They're talking about cell phone forensics. And as this information has been added, I can find out more about who Alstein is. So a lot of good information here to help accelerate the review. Again, folks can use as much or as little as you want. You can even just use the map view. Maybe that's the only thing from a permission standpoint you want folks to, for the contract reviewers to use, but maybe you want the conversation view for further downstream QC work. A lot of different options for how this works. And the nice thing about this is we can actually make very nuanced propagated decisions to help code individual branches even individual messages, and do so with a coding pane. Oops, looks like my options got clear. Oh, here we go. So we can decide whether or not to avoid attachments or duplicate spare attachments. A lot of different nuanced bulk update options here, and then you can use your existing relativity fields to edit those documents. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to hop out and take a look at some of the privlog ways, or things that we're helping on the privlog side. And really what we're going to be looking at is ways that you can combine and tether some of the automated things we're doing with Matter Analytics output, including name normalization and our automated fields, as well as some of the fields that the second pass reviewers may be adding themselves, like subject matter, to help make sure that you've got that as a part of your privlog as well. So now I'm going to hop out. And we'll take a look at an example draft privlog as folks are starting to get in and start to develop this. So here we've got some basic fields. We've got things like doc date and subject, and this is where really a lot of the curation and massaging of the privlog is going to happen. And again, it's combining some of the MA pieces as well as some of the fields that are being added by the reviewers themselves. And Jeff, I know you have a lot of experience wrangling with privilege logs. What are some of the advantages you see in really combining our auto-generated output as well as the reviewers' input and their work product to help expedite the logging?
Well, number one is having those normalized names already in place. Anybody that's had to struggle through trying to manually wrangle those names and get them all organized and spelled correctly and organized correctly knows how difficult that can be. Another part of that is the thread level or the message level recipient list, simply because in those rare instances where you need to do a log that instead of just worrying about the metadata level information, I've had a few cases like that where there's a limited amount of propagation that might be able to be done from thread members or duplicates that can be accomplished, but when messages are missing from a collection for one reason or another, that leaves the only other option for adding in those names to be manual data entry, which, getting back to the idea of manual and imprecise, you open yourself up to potential issues there. And so being able to capture all of that stuff in an automated fashion really makes for a nice and easy way to be able to populate a less common version of a privilege log without much difficulty. And then from there, as I'm sure most, if not everybody on the line is used to exporting an Excel sheet from this type of a layout, means that you can then generate concatenated full body sentences from things like the auto-generated or confirmed priv reasons, along with the manually entered subject matters, to be able to provide a thorough privilege log description suitable for submission to whomever you're generating the log for.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Jeff. And we've got some exciting things coming a little bit down the road, which we'll be able to share in the months to come, but we're going to be working to develop some ways of really helping simplify a lot of that privlog work and keep you out of Excel. So that's our hopes. We'll have more to share there in the future. So just looking at time, we've gone a little bit over here, so I want to go ahead and stop. I think this is a good place to wrap, and we can answer some of the questions from the team.
Yes, great. Thank you. What a great presentation and demo. So we do have a few questions in the queue. Let me start right up top with, how does your name normalization work with very common names like a Michael Jones or John Smith?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of the things, and we didn't have a chance to show it in the viewer, but there are going to be some names where there's going to be some ambiguity. Largely what we're doing is relying on things that are good keys for us to work with, like email address, to help make sure that we're associating names appropriately. But anywhere where we're having associations that are ambiguous and you encounter that person in the document, there's a visual indicator to say, hey, there's some ambiguous alternative matches here. And then you can look at who those individuals are right from the document. So it's a really good way to help navigate that. And then you can decide whether maybe you want to change the display name, add a middle initial or what have you. But you can fine tune that in the application. But that's definitely a good question.
Okay, great. Next question is there a limit on the number of levels within a chain that you can search for privileged communications?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are very long threads where some of the earlier information starts to get suppressed. So, for instance, you may find an email that's maybe 10 headers long, and then the first header you have only a sender and just a date. As long as we have things like the display name and not the display name, but the like duplicate spares that may contain that information, we can correlate some of those details to help find those. We do need that header information to be present, but as long as the header's there and we can identify it, we can extract that information. So that's the only scenario that I'm thinking of top of mind that would cause a challenge, is that the recipients simply don't exist. But if we have duplicate spare information that may have that, we can borrow some of that information from that. Okay.
A couple of relativity questions that came in, or relativity related, I should say. Does a user need to use your threading and name normalization, or can they use relativities?
Yeah, so we have really honed our name normalization and our threading in a way that we need to rely on it, because if you look at the header identification, it's just such an important part of identifying privileged documents. So the higher quality that is, the better the result is. I think Relativity Analytics has good output, but we do a number of things in that process that are really key to our ability to do things like separate headers from mentions and other things. So it is reliant on our algorithm specifically. But I think what folks have found is they've been very pleased with the quality of the output, the reliability of the output, especially on name normalization. And that's been really, really helpful for folks.
Fantastic. And so while we're there, with everything sort of moving to the cloud, does the H5 Matter Analytics work in RHEL 1, or must you have an on-premise instance?
Yeah, so we are compatible both with RHEL 1 as well as on-prem Relativity, all the way up to 10.3. So we can be in both, and we have customers in both today.
That's great. Fantastic. We're coming towards the top of the hour. I don't know if you or Jeff had any closing comments, but I want to give you the opportunity to do that, unless we've got a couple of other questions. Anybody who has questions, please get them into the queue. We could also, any questions we don't get to, obviously the H5 team will reach out to you afterwards. So Jason, any sort of closing thoughts, or Jeff for that matter?
Yeah. Well, I just, again, want to thank everybody for their time today. I know it's a very challenging time for many folks, so we just really appreciate the time you're spending with us. We hope that this is helpful and valuable, and you've been able to learn a few things based on our experience and based on some of the things we're doing with Matter Analytics. And yeah, we'll be sure to, any questions you have that we can't get to, we'll follow up with you over email.
And I'll second Jason and thank everybody for their time. It's been a pleasure to show this material to everyone. And as Mike said, if there are any other questions, please do let us know and reach out, and we'd be happy to answer any.
Fantastic. Thank you. So thanks everyone for joining us today on the ASIGS webinar channel. Thank you to Jason, and thank you to Jeff for a fantastic presentation, and of course to our partner H5. You can learn more about H5 at h5.com. And please visit asigs.org for a complete list of our upcoming webinars. Thank you to Deja Miller for producing our webinar today. Have a great day, everyone.